Hey, this is Joe Big House Kenn, and you are Inside the House. Inside the House is powered by Dynamic Fitness and Strength, building the better athlete. In this episode, as we continue to go through my archived material, we will do 3 discussion points. Number 1, talking about what I call the Trifecta set and how it relates to the Tier 1, 2, and 3 upper body tiers of the tier system strength training model. Second point will be the differences that I learned between working at the college level as well as the NFL. And third, we'll talk about updates on the new book as well as a mentorship program and certificate program that I will be hosting at Big House Power's world headquarters. Now, on to the show.
Possible, we now actually do what I would call a trifecta set with all of our upper body, well, at least the top 3 tiers, depending if it is a specific dynamic effort rotation for like an upper body bench wave. But what we'll do now is we'll try to pair a horizontal pull with a horizontal press and then finish it with some type of posterior shoulder. So a good example of that would have been if we're doing a typical tier 1 bench work, I'd probably have them start with a hammer row or a prone barbell row or a dead stop trap bar row. And then depending on the volume of the bench would determine the volume of our rows. So if we were going to do our standard 5x5 max effort, sub max effort, 5 rep max bench progression, we're generally going to do 8 to 10 rows. But after that, so we would go 10 prone rows, 5 benches, and then we're going to do high volume posterior shoulder work. And that would generally be like a T-raise, a chicken wing. It could be something banded, or it could be something with dumbbells or light plates. And we just, my thought process was obviously we had to get more pulls in, and we wanted to make sure we emphasized the stabilization of the back muscles. But more importantly, we had to get more posterior shoulder work for the shoulder capsule in. More so because, the shoulder joint, we talked about it on Thursday. The numerous movements of the joint just makes it, in some respects, to me, unstable. You can land on it wrong, you could lift wrong, and the shoulder always seems to be something that always has some types of issues. So if we can hit as many different movement patterns throughout a training session and the training week, it's probably beneficial for us to do that. So I've kind of decided that going forward, even for, I don't want to say a newbie, but even for the inexperienced lifter, or even for the high school lifter, or even for those who have graduated through some type of developmental process, that regardless of where you are in the training age, once you begin external loads in your lifting program, I just think in an athletic sense, if I'm training a power lifter, I'm probably going to be able to train them slightly different because, as I've always said, when you squat, bench, and deadlift for a power lifter, that is a competitive part of their sport. When you squat, bench, or dead for a athlete, it's a secondary assistance work. It's supplemental to what their sport of choice is. So for us, we have to really cover things in a different basis. A lot of people have asked, do I think the tier system would work for powerlifting? I think it would work for beginning powerlifters. Threat of tornadoes, hail, flooding, likely Sunday. Okay, that was my severe storm risk warning I just got. But yeah, I think it's important for powerlifters too. But I think the extra workouts that I would perform with a powerlifter versus an athlete, it changes dramatically. We always have to factor in different types of conditioning that I do as a lifter versus I do as training athletes. So it's important to understand the differences. As much as we derive a lot of what we do from the disciplines of weightlifting, weightlifting / Olympic lifting, and or powerlifting and even bodybuilding and strongman types of events and conditioning types of modalities. At the end of the day, we've got to combine all that to make the best athlete. So it's a unique deal when you look at it from that standpoint. And I think to cover all our bases and to continue to strive into what one of my three P's of my mission mantra are of protection, I think it's inevitable that you should put in things that are conducive to keeping the athlete in the safest possible training environment as you can. And that is why I would say that making a trifecta of the upper body in particular with a row, press, posterior shoulder complex work has a lot to do with it. What two things did you learn at the NFL level that you did not know at the college level? Oh, that's a good question. I will say this. I always knew I was going to go to the NFL. I think that's why I may have been better prepared coming from 20 years, 19 years of college when I entered the NFL, because I always studied what the model was. I always studied the calendar, and I always talked to our former players when they came back to give me what the differences were. The one thing that I'll say, and I've told this to a lot of people, there's two things that you'll learn. The number one thing that you will learn is who the onus of development is on. What do I mean by that? I mean that in this day and age of college strength and conditioning for football, it's pretty much a 365-day-a-year job. Very rarely now do athletes spend an excessive amount of time at home. Even during discretionary times, those times usually fall while the athlete is still on campus. So the onus of getting an athlete prepared at the college level is pretty much directly on the strength and conditioning coach because of the amount of time, hands-on time that you have with them. Now, at the NFL level, the onus of preparation falls squarely on the professional athlete. The way that the CBA is written, the way that the calendar is written, the way that the rules are written, realistically, from the time the season by the time the season is over for the athlete to the time that they report back in training camp, the rules really, unless it's changed since I've left the NFL with the new CBA, but they only have to be on campus, so to speak, for the 3 days of the mandatory minicamp that generally falls in June. After that, everything is completely voluntary with them being on campus. Even the off-season program that generally starts mid-April and runs through mid-June. So the onus falls squarely on the athlete because the strength coach really in that 9-week period that falls in to the NFL off-season model, 5 weeks is what I would really call what the strength coach has the ability to develop anything in the weight room. From a conditioning standpoint, it all depends on the philosophy of the coaching staff, because after the first 2 weeks, the coaches have the opportunity to take them on the field, and depending on how directive they are with the development they want to do from a specific standpoint will really affect the general physical preparation from a conditioning standpoint on the field. The weights didn't change much. During OTAs, I treated OTAs like spring ball. So for 5 weeks, I was really what you could call a winter program in college. And then the next 4 weeks were pretty much spring ball in my back. So you really have to say that that's the biggest difference. The other difference is I thought I was a good listener in college, but probably more demonstrative. The communication's definitely a lot different. I would say it's college. There is some bad cop. You're the discipline guy. You're the guy who's supposed to break them down and build them up. I learned through the NFL there's different ways to do that without being as much of a negative motivator. But in the professional levels, I think the strength and conditioning coach has to serve in somewhat of the good cop, because they have to help service the athlete and allow them to be lengthen their careers. So those are the two biggest things. Had nothing to do with training. My training plan was already ready. My block 4 stuff that I was doing at the end of my career at Louisville and Arizona State was very similar to what we do now. I've just learned a lot more about variation with the veterans guys, the guys who've been in the league 10, 12, 14, 15 years. I'm going to train a Hall of Famer Julius Peppers at year 17, way different than I would train him at year 1, and then even different than more guys because of his physical attributes was so much better. So, yeah, that would be it, Mike. All right, so I've been trying to write this new book for at least 10 years. Anybody that knows me knows that has been something. I've had several people who were big supporters of the first book saying, you've got to do it, you got to do it, things have changed, we've heard you speak. That is one of my goals now that I am out of what I would call competitive professional or collegiate coaching, that I am afforded with my job as the Vice President of Performance Education at Dynamic Fitness and Strength. This is part of education. So it is definitely something that's going to happen. I'm trying to figure out my best plans because I want to piggy that back with some type of I don't know if I want to call it a certification, but some type of certificate program where we have modules and a mentorship for tier system coaches who believe in it, and they can get the ability to work hand in hand with me to understand it from the nuts and bolts of it. I think a lot of people confuse it too much. So we're going to put together some type of certificate / certification mentorship program that will have modules. There'll be live mentorship weekends that will be held at my studio at my house, which most people who have been there with our inside the house invite only events have really, really cherished, especially from the networking standpoint. Most of that would probably be 10 to 12 people. So that's a big thing I'm working on. I have a lot of other things that I have to get accomplished also, but that's one of them.
Well, that's our episode for this week. And remember, we're powered by Dynamic Fitness and Strength, building the better athlete. In weeks to come, as we get back to normal life, we will start to go out and visit other coaches, as well as trying to bring original content that has not been archived. So this is Joe Big House Kenn, Words Win.